Yep. Okay. Okay. I take it by final piece you're referring to the central nozzle section? Yep. I can give you a hand with that, either here at the end of class or on Discord afterwards. It's up to you. So, hey guys. This is the same asset that I've been speed modeling for the past couple classes. I've also done, as you can see, most of the unwrap. The only thing left is these little embellishment pieces. So if you watch back the other streams, if you want to see how I made it, how I unwrapped it up to this point, it's all in the VODs. So pretty much ready to go. The only thing that's left is to chop off the caps, solve them, run strip, and that'll be it. Or strip, stack, and then I'll properly pack 1 UV space. Because right now it's a little all over the place. It's not too bad, but it's not consistent either. Nope. This was just for fun so you guys could see a model and unwrap that wasn't directly related to class. I mean, I did end up using this as one of the assets I brought into the temple that I started in class, and I'll continue and finish next week. So this will be one asset. Then I'll show you guys 3 more. And then you'll have 2 to choose on your own that are, sorry, you'll have 2 that are completely up to you. You won't have any kind of template for it. So let me just open up the class file that I gave you guys. Yep, that's exactly what I'm about to address. So anytime that you have a file that you've brought into 3CO Max, or sorry, that you're working with in 3CO Max, a lot of times when you guys are handing stuff in, this is one of the error messages that I'll get, because you've been working on the unwrap, you've been working on the texture, and then when you go to submit, you rename your texture file, in my case, you know, TomNextSasha_diffuse, but because of the way that Max looks for files, it's not necessarily smart enough to realize that the name has changed and then just reassociates it. It'll say, you know, right now it's looking for a lighting map, but we'll get to that next week. Sorry, week following, week 5. So if you've renamed a file, or renamed a texture rather, this will come up, missing external files. It's just letting you know that either the file's not in the same place relative to the 3CO Max scene that you're working on, or that the name's been changed. So you can just hit continue. And then if you still have that file available, you would just reassociate it either by going into the material editor and grabbing the material, which apparently I don't have on this right now. So pick it, and then just bring in a new bitmap, direct it to wherever. This is gonna look awful. Should look awful. Yeah, because this isn't unwrapped. That's it. There is something called the asset tracker, or asset tracking, where it'll actually show you all the files that are missing. At this point, you guys are going to be working with just diffuse, and later on some AO, after that specularity, after that normals and opacity, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So just realize that Max isn't smart enough to reassociate the name, that's all. What's that? Oh, it's a car. Yep. Yeah, it's a car. So a little more complex than what we've done already. At this point, I'm going to be unwrapping a similar object with you in class. That I'm going to, this class, I'm going to be unwrapping it with you. You may have, if you were watching my pre-stream preamble, I used a couple different commands that are going to be completely new. I'll be applying them to this object. So again, you guys get 2 instances where you can watch back and see how a specific command or tool was used. So I'm going to unwrap this with you guys. I'm going to go over some best practice texturing methods with you next class. And then at the end of the next class, I'll be giving you your next assignment, which is going to be unwrapping an object of similar complexity on your own and texturing it on your own. Oh, as an aside to that, week 5, so not next week, but a week after, I'm going to be slowly introducing new maps and new map types to you guys. Week 5, there is an in-class assignment, only worth 5%, but if you can't make class or make the class time for next week, I'll have a narrow Dropbox date for it, or Dropbox time. Let me know in advance. It's nothing to stress over. It's pretty click and done. So it's actually kind of easy marks for you guys. But it's only going to be able to be submitted within that narrow time window. So I've already run a planar projection map on this just to get all the shells into single pieces, or pieces based on their elements. So as always, I'm going to move them outside of 1-1 since they haven't been adjusted yet. And let's go. So I'm going to start with some of the smaller objects first, or smaller aspects of the object first. So I'll go after these guys. Again, it's always easier, or it can be easier rather, as you're working on an object, to just isolate to the polygons that you're currently unwrapping, just so you're not having to look through the rest of the model. I'll put my checker pattern on. And currently I definitely don't have at least 3 squares going across any surface of this object. So I can't really tell if it's distorted or not. So I'll dial up my checkered tiling just to the left of the drop down for textures, options dialog, and then miscellaneous preferences, checker tiling 6. There we go. So it's pretty close. One thing to be careful of whenever you're assessing an object for distortion, there are different tools and methods that you can use inside of 3CO Max. So different types of heat maps and whatnot. In the end, what's going to be most reliable is if you actually look at it yourself. Just be careful when you're working with slanted mesh, or mesh that's not completely flat on X, Y, Z. You're not looking at it on an angle. So if I'm looking at it like this, yeah, they're perfect squares. But as soon as I look at it from above, so flat on or perpendicular to the polygon, you can see the distortion. So if that top polygon is the one that you're looking at, don't view it from this angle. View it head on. So a little bit distorted, but it's going in the right direction. I can just grab the top set of vertices, and I'm going to just unwrap both of these separately, even though I could easily grab one, unwrap it, symmetry it over. Since I only need to clear out this vertical distortion, so need to change the size of the squares vertically, you can use a shift constraint. So I've got vertices selected, or vertice mode rather, got these guys selected. If you start moving and hold shift, it will constrain you to either vertically only or horizontal only adjustments. If you're making small adjustments and your pen control, mouse control isn't all that accurate or all that precise, like my hands have a pronounced bit of shake to them, you can go into the movement tool and constrain yourself to either horizontal only or vertical only movement through the move tool. My personal preference though is to keep the move tool on all both axes, but then to use freeform mode, because it's going to give me those little manipulator handles. So looking at top down, adjust. Okay. It's the eye or orange eye icon on top of a triangle at the base here. Originally, it was just a planar projection. And it wasn't even a proper planar projection, because if I isolate, it's actually still remembering where that planar projection was. So it's definitely been slanted. Yep. So whenever you're unwrapping something, when possible, you want to try and get at least one polygon to start with, having perfect squares or zero distortion on it. So before I did that move adjustment, obviously I don't have squares anywhere, so I didn't really have a starting point. By just making the adjustment to those top two vertices, now I've got these two polygons displaying correctly. I can pin them in place. So with those two polygons selected, Control, click verts, pin in place. And now I can start trying to do quick peels. Here, the entire idea of pinning is to tell Max these vertices, or the vertices for these polygons, are where I want them to be. Now I want Max to try and get the other vertices to match them, or match their current shape and size. Just add an unwrap UVW to it. Yep. Gotcha. I accidentally just hit a bunch of mesh. after you have the 4 vertices for those polygons selected, control click vert to convert your selection from polygon to the vertices that make it up, and then pin them in place. So at this point, I'm looking to start getting squares on the rest of it. So this guy's pooched, super pooched. So always build out from what you've already sort of stabilized or what you've already gotten properly unwrapped. So right now, this is the polygon that's messed up. I'll start making my adjustments. And yes, I am going to use Quick Peel to do this automatically in a second, but I'm just illustrating a point. So now this guy. I am moving it in 2D, but I'm actually only watching here. Once they're in the correct positions, I just pin those vertices in place. So that even if I accidentally run Quick Peel on this again, I don't know why it's trying to go over there when I don't have detach or white overlap on. It won't change shape. So I can keep going. 6x or 6 times tiling doesn't work on these surfaces. They're just too small. Rather than the scaling, rather than shell up, I'll just increase my tile. Shift, 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 shift. Shift, 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 shift. Now, no matter how I adjust this, so I'll try for, I've got kind of squares going here. As soon as I try to get perfect squares going from this polygon to this one, as soon as I get perfect squares on that smaller piece, so perfect squares, now I've destroyed this one, and this one becomes even worse. So you need to be able to adjust this vertice for this polygon only and keep this one where it currently is. So that means you have to do a break. As soon as you break, you can move them independently of one another. If I'll break for some reason. There you go. So now I can move that vertice for that poly by itself. get my squares. Since we've already established or told Max that these polygons are properly sized, we've told it that these 3 polygons need to have breaks in between them for those vertices to move independently of one another. You can just select the whole shell. So polygon mode, double click. By the way, if you hear me say hit rather than click, that's what it means. I don't know how I picked up the habit of saying hit instead of click, but I did. So now I've got nice squares, nice squares, nice squares, more. And now I've got the little interior inset on its own, or as its own shell. So anytime you see a hard 90, so these guys, that's an invitation to do a break. So separating the shells apart. I kind of like to be able to paint from this surface to this surface, this to this, this to this, without worrying about any kind of seam showing up. Yeah, it was this cut. Sorry, break. Are these vertices pinned? And did you it's letting you know that they're sisters. So just double click the whole shell in poly mode and then hit quick peel. On these guys. So this vertice right here needs to be moved differently to get this polygon and this polygon to be clean. So I'll just undo that break that I did. So right now they're still stitched together. It's a white interior edge. So if I move that vertice and get perfect squares here, now if I try to move it and get perfect squares on this polygon, I can, but as soon as I do, I screw this one up. So in order to get these two to be unwrapped independently of one another, that edge or that shared edge needs to be broken. So these two UVs correspond to the same vertex in 3D space, but you can move it independently for each of the polygons. Is this lower guy still attached? Stitchosaurus. One sec. I'll reattach mine. Stitch. Oh, this is bad. So is this guy still white? So double hit him. Yeah. I did them at the same time. Okay. So break it and peel it. Oh. And you selected the entire edge loop by double clicking on it. No worries. This guy. your shell should look like this. Do you have this turned on? Detach. All right. So I'll do it on the other one. This is why I have two of them up. So grab this guy, break. So now this is a separate shell. And then you break these two guys. And then rip. So you broke this piece off, and then it's these two edges. So you've got almost a 45-degree angle here. Break it. Yep. You can do it in Discord. Just CMP it. Yep. So I'll also do it another way. Rather than doing edge clicks, so for whatever reason Max may be giving having a temper tantrum. If you select a group of polygons from a part of the shell, so I'm selecting these 4 faces, and then I hit break, it's going to break all of the all the edges on its border. So it's going to break that selection of polygons off as its own shell. So when I hit quick peel with the detach off, come on Max, these guys are still distorted. I can't actually unwrap them until those 2 edges are broken. So break. Yeah. In the UV window. Yeah. Yep. It's this icon right here. So just as a bit of a reminder, there are multiple levels of hide unhide commands inside of Max. If I right click, go hide unselected, nothing happens. If I right click, hide selected, nothing, well, because I'm inside of a sub object or inside a UV editor, nothing happens. These commands, these are global commands. So previously we had repeat last parentheses poly versus repeat last global. This will hide and unhide objects inside the edit poly command itself. There's hide and unhide. That's referring to the sub objects. So either polygons. So now there's a hole in it. Unhide all. And then inside of doesn't help, yeah. And then there's a UV specific version of it. So when you're UV unwrapping, this is the isolation command you're using rather than this guy. Yep. It'll happen. I can guarantee it almost. So Nikolai, I'm going to actually duplicate what you currently have. So stitch selected, stitch. Come on, don't be a punk. No, it's a pretty mechanical operation. So this is what you currently have. Yeah. Okay, so you're still good. You still want to have this guy pinned. So go vertice, pin selected, so that those polygons are pinned, because it currently looks like you just have the top two. Then what you're going to do is, with this big shell, you're going to select one edge, and from the stitch commands, go stitch to source. That's going to move the sister to what you have selected. Do that with the next edge, stitch to source, next edge, stitch to source. When you try to rerun the quick peel, that'll give you this sort of almost conical shape. Then you just need to take the left and right edges of this polygon and break them. And then run peel again. So you're actually one step ahead of me, because you already have this guy broken off, and broken off correctly. So keep that. Yeah. Even if it's an accident, it's a happy accident, right? So this intersection of the whatever engine outlet, exhaust, whatever it is, it's got the same problem. It's got this change in volume, so this was extruded in towards the middle of the mesh. It's not going to be possible to get this guy unwrapped until you break those 90-degree corners. So break them, grab the shell, peel it, and you're set. Wonkier than what I have right here. Make sure that you don't have more than 4 vertices pinned for this. So actually, let me go back to your screenshot. You have these guys pinned. This option, just to the right of pin selected, is unpin selected. Yeah. So you've got some, maybe not this bad, but you've got something that's irregularly shaped like this. Make sure that you only have 2 vertices pinned. So if I had more than, if I had more than 2, so 1, 2, 3, and I start trying to peel it, it's just not going to work, because now that 3rd vertice is locked in position. As long as it's 2 vertices, it'll be correct. Sorry, 2 vertices and no more. Okay. Like rope. So wait, the formation is the exact same that I have. It's just like rotated weird or something. So give me a screenshot. Yeah, that's exact. Wait. Are you sure you're looking at the same shell that you've unwrapped? Because you do have the exact same shape, but I think you might be looking at the other one. It's okay. It's Friday. Come on, everyone together. Chug, 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 chug. Yeah, take the caffeine easy. And with the entire do as I say, not as I do, this stuff, a number of your instructors, I can say for certain, Jasmine and I both refer to that as death water. It's a nice way to kill yourself, essentially. Slowly kill yourself with caffeine overdose. Yeah. Don't drink that garbage. Yeah, be careful with the caffeine supplements. You don't want to get to the point where it's like first thing in the morning, oh, I need my coffee. You know, drink all your caffeine, and then at like 1 a.m. you're like, oh my god, I can't get to sleep. Where's the sleep medication or like, you know, sleep aids? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you guys aren't getting homework this class, so not yet anyway. Next week. slowly revving the engine up. Yep. So these two pieces are done. I'm going to deal with stacking them and whatnot later on. But next I'm going to go after these little engine nozzles down here. So obviously lots of distortion because it's still from the planar projection in this case. So unfortunately, one phrase that you're going to hear me say over and over is, it depends on the situation. This is one of those situations. And both of these shells or what will be two shells will be treated differently depending on what kind of texture is being applied to it. So these little engine nozzles, kind of the same idea or the same plan as what we had for the A-wing, where we just want to create a assign a gradient to it, or a radial gradient. So something along, no. Yep. So we want to add something like this to it, although, you know, with a little bit better color. So, you know, go full white to maybe, you know, really saturated light yellow. To an orange. We want to apply something like that to it. So a radial formation. That means that in order to unwrap this, so I'm going to use that same detach trick. So rather than running a planar projection, cutting these edges, I'm going to select that vertice in the middle, convert to poly, and then I'm going to hit break. So now this is its own separate shell. Sorry, why not select the polygons? I did. Oh, you mean like select by polygon first? Just because you can get them all together, all at the same time in one click. So you grab, yep. Come on, undos. There you go. So grabbing that pole vertice, convert to polygon selection. So all of the polygons that touch that vertice are now your selection. And then inside the UV editor, break. It's probably hard to tell, but those edges or exterior edges turned purple as soon as I did that. And now the shell's separate. In 1 second, I've got someone messaging in Twitch. Got my mic working, but I got a little behind in the process. When I select my mesh outside the UV editor, it doesn't show up as all red on the poly select. F2. I'll just type that. This one, it was already broken because it's a separate mesh. It doesn't actually connect to the main body of the ship. Did you already run a quick peel on it? Oh, because from the file that I gave you, it should already be like this. Unless you hit quick peel, in which case it's going to look like this. Excuse me. What could be going wrong? Turn off your isolate or turn off your display only selected polygons. Make sure that's not clicked. And make sure that you didn't accidentally only select a certain ring. So just double click that, or sorry, double check rather, that you don't have only part of the mesh isolated. You want the full engine nozzle. When they're underneath something, you can select them from 3D. So like if this was, here, I'll do it. nearly impossible for me to select it as is. If you go into your 3D viewport and double click it in poly mode, it'll select the entire shell. And that's an easy way to move it out. Cool. So, yep. Okay, so you ran another planar projection on it, which works. It'll still work. Yep, you're fine. Your shells are just in different orientations, but it's still the same thing. Here, I'll do it. Z-axis. And then break. Yeah, you'll still get the same result. So once that inner cone has been detached, and I'll do this on both at the same time. Bang, out. So remember the function of quick peel is to try and get the edge distances measured in 3D to match the edge distances measured in 2D. So it's usually a good place to start. I don't really have any vertices that I can pin in place at this point because it's just a cylinder cap. So if I hit quick peel, regardless of the original shape or the original orientation of the projection, they're still basically, they are still the same shape. Looking at them head on looks correct. But as soon as you tilt your camera, that's pretty distorted. All the way around. But if what you're going to be applying to it is this radial texture, so you guys don't have to do this, I'm just doing, showing application of theory. Just call it texture. Sorry, the fake perfect squares in the circle. Oh, yeah, I'm about to show you how it gets addressed. Yeah, just watch this part. You got it. So if I'm applying that gradient pattern to it, it's going to look correct. Even though there's distortion on it, because I have radial distortion, so that's what's actually happening with that cylinder, or cylinder cap rather, because my texture matches that shape, so round shell with a little bit of radial distortion, round texture, it's going to look right. So there are going to be times, just like with the canopy on the A-wing, where in order to get the texture completely distortion free, or the unwrap distortion free, so I'll just dial down my tiling a little bit. So again, it's rect. If I wanted to get all the distortion out of it, I would have to break at least one edge and then run peel. So now I've got perfect little squares going all the way around. But I'm going to run into situations where I'll end up with texture seams down the sides. So if I were to add in one more detail to this, so I'll go select, modify, border, 4 pixels. So now I'm putting engine rings or indentations, ridges, whatever you want to call it. So now I've got some actual directional detail in it. Still radial. Did I not save it out as the same file? Yeah, I did. There it is. Just the slightest shift will cause this sort of thing to happen. So that's exactly where I broke my edges. And that's where it's going to generate a texture scene. So it is possible, but what's easier? Getting these guys to line up perfectly every single time, or stitch these guys back together. Rerun the peel. And having no seams. And it's because I'm getting all this stuff. I'm overworking the texture just a little bit, because this is super low poly. So it really does depend on what you're doing, unfortunately. So a lot of times when you're unwrapping, you're throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. It's not uncommon for you to get to the point, and I'm actually going to experience a bit of this with that podium that I'm doing. Certain UV setups won't work, or will limit what kind of textures you put on it. For now, that cap formation is going to be good enough. And you'll have something like this on your homework. You don't. It's next week. I'm saying when you get your homework assignment, if you're confused as to what to do with something that looks like this, you can either remember what I just did or watch this back. Correct. So the engine nozzles, or the engine nozzles on the sides of the engine nozzles, whatever, I'm going to do another consideration, or another variation, which I actually used when I was unwrapping that podium / lantern, temple lantern. So again, depending on what kind of texture is being applied to it, if I want this to be perfect squares, I'll break it. Sorry, break at least one edge, peel. A little bit of distortion. A little bit of distortion. But overall, fairly solid, considering that there's a change in volume. There's going to be some distortion on it. But, go ahead. I'm guessing you probably did something like this, or you got something like this. That idea. Okay. When you did your break, I'm guessing that you didn't have the entire edge loop. So either this little tiny edge or the larger edge were not broken. The break has to go from one open border edge to the other. It's basically the same thing as selecting all these polygons. Cylindrical projection, fit center. Same deal. Two weeks. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. No worries. And that's why I like the Twitch format. I don't have to worry about whether or not FOL will handle the file size, which, by the way, is 3.6 gigs per lesson. Yeah. Yeah, I downloaded one to check what its size was from last term. It was 3.6 gigs. This was MP4 compression. Yeah, they're big. Well, it's multi-channel audio plus 1080p resolution, so yeah, they're gonna be large. And that's the other reason why I like Twitch. Even though your connection may not be great and it's a little grainy, when you go back to watch the cached version of it, it's gonna be full resolution. Let me see. So what you can do is either it was a marquee slip or you had already cut it once. So you've got what I have right now. If you go select one of those edges and single select, don't try to marquee select. It won't matter this time, but it can screw you up later. Just select the one edge that you want to stitch, right click, stitch selected, peel, you're good. Either. They all do the same command, it's just how they function is slightly different. So stitch is going to automatically move either the entire shell or the entire shell of the sister, or just one edge or the sister edge over. Stitch to target will move your selection to its sister. Stitched average is they're going to meet in the middle, and stitch to source is going to move the sister to your selection. It's just 3 variations on the same command. Yep, that's what you want it to do. Yep. You got it. Or they got it. So, like I was saying, depending on what kind of texture you're applying to it, sometimes the rules will change. So, I've got a tileable material here, or texture rather. I happen to have chainmail on my desktop when I was doing this lesson last, so I'm going to keep using the chainmail. I just wanted something that was tileable and had some directional information to it. So if I apply that chainmail, obviously it's going to look weird, but bear with me. I'm just going to dial up the tiling. The peel. Make sure you have polygon selected when you run quick peel. Otherwise, it's going to apply quick peel to everything. So, 1 second, I'm gonna do it again. So I've got this chainmail texture applied. It's tileable, so it should be able to repeat multiple times without a seam showing. What I have currently selected is the shell that I just quick peeled. So I broke one side of it, quick peeled it, that was it. It's got relatively little distortion on it, but it's got this big ugly seam right down the side. This next tool I'm going to show you is specifically for these situations. If you were hand painting this, which for the most part we are, you know, I bring this into Photoshop and I want to, you know, create some rings around it or make a little, you know, button on it or whatever. I basically have to follow that curvature, and as I get further to the outside, that curvature has to change. So it's a bit of a pain in the neck. Yeah, low distortion, great. Sucks to try and texture on top of it though. So the alternative is to grab the same edges that we were originally going to break. So I'm going to keep this version as a quick peel. This version, I'm going to select the same 2 edges, but I'm going to go into the Unwrap UVW modifier, just below the projection modifier or the projection options. I'm going to go down here to wrap. This guy right here. Unfold from strip, or unfold strip from loop. So same edges, instead of breaking them, I'll click it. I don't know why it scales it huge, but there is a little thing that I need to fix, but I'm just going to scale this down and move it back into 1:1 UV space, so that you can see the advantage of this version. Yeah, it's tiny. So there is a little fix that I still need to do. For whatever reason, when you run Unfold from strip, sometimes it'll give you all of your other lines are completely straight. So straight, 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 straight. This one's a little janky, but this one's completely bent. That's why we set up align horizontally and align vertically to pivot as hotkeys, so that you can just double click this, and instead of coming up here to align horizontally to pivot, in my case I just hit Alt Q. It does the same thing. So now where's the seam? Assuming that you have a good tileable texture. So the question becomes, what's going to be easier to texture? The quick peel result that has all of its distortion minimized, but then has this big ugly seam or texture seam on the side of it where the texture doesn't line up. If I try to draw a straight line across that shell, good luck. Or this guy, where yeah, you have distortion on it. You can see it going across here. But the distortion doesn't directly impact the texture. And if I wanted to go through and add linear edge work or linear line work to it, I can completely do that without an issue. So again, unfortunately, it does become a matter of what the situation is, or context sensitive as to which method of unwrap you'll use. The higher I go with tiling, the more distortion I get. But you guys won't have to worry about that until later, because all you need to do to fix it website. It's just an error coming from the triangulation. Remember, every 3D engine is always going to be interpreting 3D data as triangles. So that distortion that we're seeing happens right on the edge of where the polygon gets split into triangles. The smaller the triangles, the less distortion. But again, you guys won't have to worry about that or be expected to do that until, when do they have you doing it? I think it's year 3. You'll be adjusting your mesh like this in order to get tileable textures to work. I'm pretty sure that's what is being posted right now inside of 3D dev feedback or show off feedback. So, all that rigmarole aside, take off this material. This is the better solution for our situation. So I can grab those same edges, or grab 2 edges on the other side, or on the other engine nozzle. Go to unfold strip from loop. Repair the single damaged edge. I'm going to repair this guy too, because it's going to drive me nuts if I don't. Now, instead of having to go scale, shrink, move, here's the next tool. Underneath the peel settings, or the peel options, I've currently got the polygons to this shell selected. Under Arrange Elements, bottom right is Pack Normalize. Hit it. Exactly. Like only 1 ring of polygons rather than 2. Change your edge selection. So if you're, so it just so happens that mine worked without an issue. I did have a problem with this last class, so I just got lucky. So if these 2 edges are giving you just one of these 2 shells, okay, you can either change your selection, so just like rotate up 1 and then unfold from strip. If that doesn't give you the correct result, you can just stitch them together. So once you have both the thin strip and the thick strip, you can just right click, stitch selected, and then stitch down the middle. It's a little more rigmarole, but it's also reliable. A little janky. Just double click the edge loop and use Align Horizontally to pivot. No worries. Texturing the inside, like texturing these polygons. Generally, if the polygon's there, it should be textured. Generally speaking. Good question. Perfect. Oh, the flattening's coming from this tool. Unfold from... Oh. And when you went pack normalize, it just made it even larger. It won't change the shape, it'll only scale it. It'll only... No. All pack normalize is doing is if you have a set of polygons selected and then hit pack normalize, make sure by default rescale should be on. As soon as you hit pack normalize, all it's doing is it's taking the shell that you have selected, moving it to 1 UV space, and then scaling the shell in uniformly, so it's not adding any kind of distortion, scaling it in, and then it's going to give you a little bit of buffer room between your shell and the border. Shoot. Selecting 2 edges. So 1 second, I'll just goof this one again. So that's what it currently looks like in its UVs. I know. I'm just resetting mine. Grab the 2 edges. So if you were to apply a cylindrical unwrap to this, you would have to split directly up one side. Select 2 edges, and then click Unfold Strip from Loop. Oh, one of the edges is janky? Like the entire thing, or just... Yeah, give me a screenshot. Potentially. It's running that peel from strip. You're not pressing quick peel. Quick peel will give you what Caitlin just posted. Yep. do the thing, get the shell, woo! It's just this command. Yep. Yep. After you run the unfold strip from loop, it'll be gigantic. Just make sure it's selected. So go poly mode, select the whole thing, either by marquee or double hit it. And then from arrange elements, go pack normalize. Make sure that you're in poly mode when you select the shell. Because if you're in a sub object, I'm pretty sure it's gonna... Why isn't mine doing it? 1 second. I'm going to try to repeat an error. See how it goes. Still not doing it. Yep. What could it be? What you can do in that case is basically yeah. Or what should also work is tell Max to basically ignore everything else by isolating to what you just unfolded from strip. Still select the shell, then pack normalize, and then unisolate. Max can be dumb. Still a good program, don't get me wrong, but every program you're going to find it has some kind of little quibble or workaround that, you know, sometimes it functions as expected, sometimes not so much. I'm just making them straight. I noticed that there was just a little bit of curvature to them. And I'm not going to be taking calipers to your work, but when it's mine, yeah, I will. It's just these guys. Yep. That's why I have them set as, that's why those are the only custom hotkeys I use. Because, you know, if I keep doing this every time I want to use it, although it is in the quad menu, I believe. Is it not anymore? Oh, it's gone, moved out. Yeah, rather than doing any kind of mouse traveling at all, I find it's just faster to have it on my keyboard like that. So that was aligned vertically to pivot, making everything. So now I'm going to address one of the questions that someone had. How do you get them to the exact same size or get them to overlap? So now that we know that pack normalize is going to reliably rescale your shells, if the shells are the exact same size in 3D geometry, so this one's going to be like this one's going to be a little tiny. They're still the same size in 3D. If I select them both and use pack normalize, it's going to set them to the same size because they are the same size in 3D space. What pack normalize is actually doing on a technical level is it's taking the overall distance or the surface area of one of your polygons and getting everything to match. So when we were doing the A-wing unwrap, I said try and keep your size of squares consistent. Now, because this tool is so flaky, this is why I didn't have you guys use it. Plus, hitting you with a whole bunch of tools would probably make you want to tear your hair out. Try and keep your square sizes consistent. So right now, these guys are really big. These guys are really small, which translates to this is going to be a very low res texture. This is going to be very high res. Selecting all 4 shells, and you can do all 6 if you want, but I'm going to do all 4. And then going pack normalize, it'll match your shell sizes perfectly. So now those squares, same size as these squares, same size as these, and now I can actually stack them. So I grab them. So I grab this side shell, convert selection to vertices, so control click, turn my snaps on, and stack. Same thing here. Now this is a little different because the shells are slightly different shaped. And by slightly, I mean very. So I'll just realistically, it would be a lot easier to just go, you guys don't have to do this, but a lot easier to do the same thing we did with the A-wing. This one's correct, this one's wrong. Delete, attach, symmetry, reattach. Perfect. That's a lot faster. The slow way, quote unquote manual way. I'll just quickly repeel these. Mind you, this isn't wrong to do it the slow way. It's just slow. So I'll just rerun the peel. This guy's flipped inside out. There he is. The quote-unquote slow way would be to, since you know that these edges up at the top are the same length, you'd stack them on top of one another. So snaps on this guy to this guy. You would take off the rest of your pins, peel it, mirror it, stack it. Same result, exact same result. Just one's a couple clicks going in and out of edit geometry or edit poly. One of them is a little bit more of a wrangling of UVs. Same result. So the only problem is I have never gotten copy paste UVs to work properly. So there is supposed to be a way to select one shell, copy it, and then get another shell to match it perfectly. So edit, paste. But for whatever reason, and I just haven't bothered trying to get this to work properly, it ends up destroying your unwrap in the process. So those are definitely not squares. So I just don't use it. So these guys are done. Give them a scale in. These guys are done. Scale in. Done. So I only move stuff into 1, 1 UV space once it is completely unwrapped. Next thing we'll go after is the tail fin. Just like the tail fins on the A-wing, one major exception. There's no symmetry line. Now, depending on your workflow, depending on who you're working with, you may not be able to add mesh to something. They may say, this is the mesh, it has to be this exact same shape by the end of it, or when you finish unwrapping and texturing it. So, working with that assumption, we cannot add an edge to this. We still have two sides that are the exact same. So we can grab them, linear projection them, get our squares. Now the two halves are perfectly overlapped, with this back series of faces completely destroyed because they're self-overlapping. So all we have to do is break this guy off and peel him. Tail fin's done. Shoot. It's either the hotkey of S or the magnet in the lower right hand corner of the UV window. Snaps toggle. So give me 1 second, I'm just gonna, no worries. 1 second, I'm going to do a little demonstration here in a second. Get the brush shape off. So, something to be aware of. When I popped off that little piece of shell, so these 3 polygons, they automatically came in rotated. So it's not huge, but it's there. You can see that it's rotated up slightly. It's best practice, whenever possible, to align your shells either on the vertical or horizontal axes. In this case, all that means is grab the bottom of the shell, align horizontally to pivot. That makes this edge flat. Pin those vertices in place, tying 3CO max. This is the orientation that the rest of the shell should have. And then peel it. That's it. Rather than having a tilted shell and then being like, is it 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees? No. Just get the edge, flatten it, pin it, and peel the shell. So, does it really matter? I'll show you why. Sorry, gotta switch its tiling. So, does it matter? Kind of. If you have the texture aligned to either vertical or horizontal axes, X or Y, U or V, depending on how you want to say it. These are both edges, or sorry, lines with the same edge, or sorry, the same line weight, so they're the same width. I use the same settings for each brush stroke. They're completely straight, so none of my janky line quality. That vertically aligned or completely vertical line against a completely vertical shell, pretty clean. It's crisp, clean edges to it. If I had this rotated and then had to draw a line down the middle of it for my texture. So I took this UV layout into Photoshop. I said I needed a line going straight down the middle of it, so I, tap, shift, tap. Look how jagged that is. That's pretty low quality. Now, a lot of people immediately run to the conclusion rather, oh, we'll just use, if this is a 1024 texture, we'll just use a 2048. Yeah, it's going to look cleaner. But by number one, by comparison, this guy will still look better. And now you've just doubled the you've just increased rather the texture memory that that object is going to use. So, whenever possible, try and keep your shells aligned, or properly aligned rather. Again, the easiest way to do that: select a edge that you know is completely straight on either X or Y or even Z inside of 3D. Make it mechanically straight with either a line vertically or a line horizontally to pivot. Peel. That's it. I don't know why this guy got quick peel, but bang. That's it. So there's the tail fin. Done. My scale's getting a little out of hand. So, one last object before we get to the hard one. It's this guy. should look similar. Or this should be giving you the same sort of vibe as what we did here. Same process. So isolate so that you don't have to be looking through a bunch of other things. Vertice, select the pole, convert, turn on detach and peel. There it is. Yep. Select the pole, polygon. So I turned on detach for that one. So remember, if you have a series of polygons selected and tell it to peel with detach turned on, it's going to break them off. So now this highlighted in red is its own shell that's already been peeled. So select the select the pole vertice, convert to poly. Either quick peel with detach turned on, or break, peel. Same thing. So these guys are done. There is a little bit of distortion to them because they are conical in shape. One of the places that you'll see this most is with eyes. That's why everyone hates unwrapping spheres. They cheat it. So they cheat it as much as they can. The main body. Edge, edge. Selecting one entire edge loop. Unfold from strip. Gives you a giant version of it. Select it, pack normalize. Good to go. You will have a little bit of distortion on it. So I've got rectangles at the front, perfect squares on the back. It's just the nature of the beast. But this allows me to easily texture without seams all the way down the engine. Just got a little bit of jankiness. Select it. Line horizontally to pivot. These guys are a little curved too. That's it. Now, as I'm moving this, hopefully you guys are noticing that there is a texture seam pretty visible there. So it's not that I have distortion, that's where the seam is. Whenever possible, you kind of want your seams to be in an area that the player won't see on a regular basis. Sooner or later, no matter how dedicated of a texture artist you are, you're going to accidentally miss a texture seam and it's going to go to the final product. It's inevitable. It happens to everyone. Most of the time your art lead catches it, so your boss or your supervisor catches it and tells you to redo it. Sometimes that doesn't happen. So where possible, I won't list or rag on any particular title for that, but I'm sure you guys have seen a couple. Whenever possible, try and set your seams to where it's going to be least visible, the least visible edge on the object. So on the side of the engine, that's pretty visible. It's not as bad as if it was at the top, because assuming this is an actual F-Zero game, camera's usually back here. So anything across the top of the engine is going to be right in front of the player the entire time they're playing. This edge, however, not only is it not that visible, but there's even a piece of geometry that hides half of it. So probably a good idea to have that as your break. So rather than doing the unfold from strip on this edge, I'll move down to that lower, rerun it. Obviously that means I have to repair it, or repair it again rather. Pack normalize. And now even if I end up with a really bad texture seam, so I'll hit it with that chainmail again. Even if I end up with a really bad texture seam, it's going to be someplace that the player realistically won't be able to tell. And it just so happens that mine actually lined up really well for once. That was accidental. Happy accident, but still accident. There we go. No, had it. There we go. So, texture seam. But because it's on the bottom of the engine, player will never see it. So, it's basically hiding your sins. You always hope that you'll never have a texture seam. In the event that you do, hide it. So that's basically all the pieces except the hardest one, which is the main body. So grab it, isolate it, let's do it. And since it kind of makes sense, we're going to be chopping this thing up like a vehicle parts shop. So, whenever possible, look for the simplest areas to start with. Usually that translates to the least visible. Bottom. So this goes back to, I forget who asked it, but it was they were asking if an object or if a set of polygons isn't seen, do you need to texture it? Anything that exists on the model should be unwrapped and textured, but you can give it slightly less priority. So the chances of players seeing the bottom of the ship or bottom of the craft, pretty damn low. Unless the camera ends up, you know, dipping underneath, or it goes across water and it reflects the bottom of the ship or something. It's least visible. Fortunately, it's also the simplest. It's just a flat surface with a little bit of a tilt on the back. Grab it, break it, peel it. It's going to come in an angle. Grab a edge, make that edge straight. Pin that edge, take off the other pins, and peel it to align it to X or Y axes. That's it. At this point, there's a couple features that we've already done, either a parallel of it or the exact same thing. This guy. This guy. These guys. After you straighten it, make sure that the that the vertices of the edge that you've straightened get pinned. Take off any of the default pins that Max used. So unpin select. So I'll just set these pins. Sure, give me one tick. There, I'll just reset. So there is another way of doing this where you just select the edges and pop it off, but as you guys get more comfortable, you can do the fast track ways. So that's all the polygons for the bottom. Break it. Peel it. Okay, that's gross. So I had extra pins on there still, so I'll just take them off. Peel. In order for Max to peel anything, at least 2 vertices need to be pinned. If you don't pin them yourself, Max will guess. Max will always guess wrong. So get one of your edges completely straight. Convert to vertice. Pin. Take off or remove, unpin the vertices that Max chose, because again, they're usually wrong or garbage. And then just run quick peel. That'll get it aligned to X, Y, or UV as this in this case. So we've already done formations like this. It's literally this guy all over again. So as you unwrap pieces and move them into 1-1, it usually helps to just slowly remove those shells. So this is the shell that I'm breaking down. All these guys have been unwrapped. So I'll just reselect, re-isolate. And now that bottom piece is missing. I know that it's been done. Hence, UV chop chop. So all you're doing is basically all these sections need to be their own shells, or should be their own shells. And then they require breaks on the on the 90-degree corners in order for them to properly unfold. So, oh, I just did a random planar projection. Yep. Correct. Exactly right. So, pop, peel. I don't know why it went down to a single pixel. So, if it does, if Max freaks out, hit it with a quick planar. Again, any axes will work. Peel. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Still give me distorted as hell. So grab an edge. Any edge, as long as it's, you can tell that it's straight in 3D. Set it straight in 2D. Pin. Take off the auto pins. Repeel. There's your hard 90. Grab it. Do the same thing on the other side. I don't know why it's not letting me select this. Oops. Break. There we go. Here. Repeel. You got a flower. I don't know if there's a proper name for it. I've never seen one. I usually just call it a flower unwrap because it ends up looking like the petals of a flower. You've got the center face of the flower. That's what you pin. Then you've got the polygons coming off the sides. So it ends up looking like the face of a flower or a daisy. I just call it flower unwrap. This guy's done. Move them into 1-1. I'm not being overly particular about my scale because I still don't know how many shells I'll be left with. Reselect the body, re-isolate. The piece that's been done, no longer see it. Same thing here. It's the same shape, it's just the sides are triangles instead of quads. Pop it, pull it, peel it. Damn it. Run a planar projection. Pin the bottom. Peel. Break your hard corners. Peel. Done. Move it into 1-1. Re-isolate. So you're slowly chopping pieces off. These little insets, exact same thing. This one I'm going to do both at the same time. So these would be the quote-unquote stable polygons. Grow selection once. Pop them off. Peel. The faces are correct, but I'm going to get these completely flat. So align, align, pin, unpin, peel. 45-degree corners. Break, flower unwrap. Now it's giving me trouble. There we go. So I just selected them both, isolated them, and ran pack normalize. So Max started doing what I was doing to someone else earlier, where they had two shells or a shell selected, tried to pack normalize, and again, it gives me a different result. And it was moving everything else. So pack normalize with the two shells selected, isolate, and if I wanted to, not planning to at this point, but stack, done. So setting one of your edges to straight has a bunch of advantages to it, not the least of which is gives you a good starting point for doing stacks, or stacking shells rather. So, Perfect. Yep. The only reason I ran a planar projection, it had the advantage of automatically breaking the shell off, but the actual reason, or the reason I used it that time, was because when I quick peeled it, it just shrunk to a single pixel. Sometimes when the shell overlaps itself, Max freaks out, and instead of trying to unfold it, it just crushes it. Max. Maya does it too on occasion. As long as it's more... Ideally, you would want to straighten and pin an edge that is straight in either X or Y world space. So if it's like running parallel to the floor, that's usually the one that you want to stitch. Sorry, pin rather. So like I wouldn't want to be using one of these edges as a pin, or this edge as a pin, because they're angled. But any of these. Of quick peel. Yeah. No, if it gives you a good automatic pin result, use it. It's so rare to happen, it's like a unicorn. You're happy to see it, but you don't expect to. So even after running the peel, it's still distorted with the two pins on a straight edge. Okay. If not, let me know and toss a screenshot into the Discord. I'll just slow down a bit. I realize I've been going pretty speedy. So I'm just going to play around with the scaling. Because anytime you run peel, if you don't have vertices already pinned, so like right here, if I take my pins off, if you don't have any pinned already, in order to run the peel operation at all, two vertice positions need to be locked in place. If you don't lock them, Max will at random choose two vertices and pin them for you. Occasionally it picks the right ones, but it's very rare. Run quick peel first, just so that the mesh is now unfolded or self-overlapped to a certain extent. Take off the two pins that Max gives you, find the edge that you want to make straight, align it either vertically or horizontally to pivot, and then immediately pin those vertices. So if I were to do something... Okay, no, if you follow it, then... Actually, I'll do it anyway. Why not? Come here. And I'll goof up my planar projection so it's garbage. So planar projection automatically popped it out. Quick peel gets it from overlapping itself, because right now it's a bunch of its polygons are stacked. Quick peel. There's the auto pins that Max made. You can work from them. They're not they're not ones I would choose, but they're correct. I would just need to make this line straight. And then cut the 45s, as you already said. You already knew about this. Sorry, break them, not cut them. Then rerun peel. And when I broke the edges, it just changed which half was pinned. I wanted this one pinned, not this one. So grab this straight edge, make it straight, pin its verts, peel. Same thing. Okay. I'm just looking at my Lee and seeing it just doubled for some reason. So slowly looking around at all the other areas that are kind of giving you cues as being good areas to break. Remember, you're looking for hard angles. Or areas where it would change material. So glass, presumably glass, presumably steel. So I'll go after the cockpit first, since it's going to be easy. It's the same situation as with the canopy from the A-Wing. It is a concave object. It has some volume to it. Granted, it's super low poly, but it is still essentially a really low poly sphere. So I'll pop it off with break. Peel it. I'd like to have at least one of these edges aligned to X or Y. So Max auto pin this vertex and this vertex, which are no help. So this will be my starting point. Straight, pin, take off the autos, peel. Because it's still a volumetric object, or a volume curved. It's a curved object. You're not going to be able to get rid of all of your distortion unless you add at least one more cut to the sides. Break. That's going to give you the quote-unquote correct result. So got all these nice squares. Only problem with doing it this way, obviously, is if you're applying some kind of gradient or you're trying to paint across this, that seam is going to be a pain in the neck to deal with. Not impossible, but even with 3D stuff, if you're using any kind of image as a base or any kind of procedural generator, that's going to create a seam that you're going to have to paint out later. So really, again, comes down to picking your battles. So if this edge is straight, this edge at the nose should also be straight. This edge at the back should be straight. So just for good measure, I'll pin them in place. Peel, just to minimize my distortion. I won't be able to get rid of all of it, but my options are zero distortion with texture seams, and a little more extra texture work, a little bit of distortion without the extra texture work. Depends on what you're doing. So, canopy or cockpit, done. Shoot. Okay. Yeah, I think I know what's going on. I think I know exactly what happened. So definitely not the same shape as the canopy on the A-wing, but close. Sorry, unwrap UVW on, yep. Banner, dead center, whoops. So my guess of what happened, and tell me if this is correct. So you did the planar projection, you got it to be fairly decent squares across the top before you even left planar projection. Oops. Then you had some pins on, so I'm gonna pin these guys. This is random selection of pins, but I'm just trying to confirm that this is the issue you had. Maybe I'll pin these guys too. And then when you peeled it, it tried to do that or something similar. Yep. So what I would suggest you check, and there's a couple different areas that this can happen on the A-wing, is right now, if I hit quick peel, it gets that. If I go up to the top and mirror, that's the only thing I'm going to press, and then I quick peel again. That's the correct result, well, without adding additional cuts. So my suspicion is that at some point when you were running your planar projection, or one of your planar projections, you ended up, so 1 second, I'll bring this in. So the only thing that this doesn't show you, I don't know why it doesn't, to be quite honest, but it doesn't, is there's actually a direction that's being referenced. So right now, this planar projection is actually shooting rays up. in order to map out where your UVs are or put your 3D vertices to 2D UV placement, because it's shooting up, it's actually looking at the negative side or the negative normal side of your polygons. You flipped it, yeah. So and you'll get that same issue on the tail fins too. So if you start running, once you have all the pins selected or all the polygons selected for your pins, so once you have the planar projection rotated to be correct on the tail fin, and then you have the tail fin split in half, you have all the vertices pinned, you run quick peel, one of them is going to be correct where it's rimmed in green, and the other one is going to have its green border edges along the interior. That one needs to and peel. Yep. No problem. So I'm probably going to do this a little differently than I did with the other section. There's, again, pros and cons to basically every method of unwrapping. So this one I'm going to do with minimal edges, or minimal borders rather. So I'm going to set what I currently have selected as its own shell. I'm going to be obviously sacrificing quite a bit of distortion for the ease of texturing, but again, a lot of the times it comes down to trying out a method, testing it with the texture. If it works, keep going. If it doesn't, go back, adjust your unwrap. I'd like to say that there's a magic bullet to situations. Unfortunately, there really isn't. What works in one scenario for one set of textures in one project potentially won't work in others. But same sort of, go ahead. Yeah, go for a coffee right now if you want. Pretty sure I'm actually slightly ahead of the other class, so the A-wing? No. No, next week. Yep. No, you've still got time. Sounds like my Amazon packages here. And it's just your section to boot. Yep. No. It's rare. I'll say it's rare. Yeah. Great. I wasn't actually watching the clock, but I think that was close to 5 minutes. Okay. So I've just popped this piece off. Same considerations. I still want to have a straight edge just to build everything else off of. So pin, peel. Because I have this enclosed shape. Oh god. Yep. Because I have this enclosed shape, it's 15 minutes till when I usually feed her, so she's up here to remind me that she still exists. Hey, Mika. It was weird because one of my classes this week, I don't know if it was your section or not, went to start the lesson. She's running around screaming her head off, screaming blue murder. I'm like, okay, well, that's going to be fun to teach behind. Sit down. I'm doing the little pre-stream whatever. And unbeknownst to me, because I have my headphones on, she jumps up in the beanbag chair 10 minutes into class and just goes to sleep. And 2 hours into the class, she wakes up and starts cleaning herself, and everyone in the chat's going, "Oh, cute cat, cute cat." I'm like, cute cat. And I turn and she's right behind me. I'm like, when did she get there? Little ninja, eh? She wants to help unwrap. Sorry, So, basically the situation, how cats see their food bowls. Oh, empty. Yep. Yeah, she's like that too. Although she gets fed throughout the day. Yeah. Yeah. That's justifiable, to be fair, depending on how. Gotcha. Yeah, this one's rescue as well, but I have one of those time feeders, so rather than having the full dish of food available to her 24/7, every 4 hours it's like an eighth of a cup. But then at 3 o'clock she gets wet food, and obviously she'd rather be eating wet food. Yeah. Still doing them. Let me warn you about the being known as vacuum. Alright, so sorry, little cat tangent. Because we're on the internet, there's got to be some mention of cats sooner or later. So, not the best solution. You can see that I still got areas where I have distortion. So depending on, again, having a little foresight as to what kind of texture that you want to apply to it. Is there going to be a really structured element? Mika, I know that you're hungry. If you have a really structured element that you want to get in, so again, having good concept art is going to help you out immensely. So I'm just going to go Wild Goose F0. Anywhere there's text, so that's a very structured element. Anywhere there's text, that's a very structured element. That's an area that you want to be as distortion free as possible. Anything with really pronounced linear detail to it. So the Wild Goose in this case has those little vents on the back. There's also a little side vent over here. And it's still got some of that plating or greebling effect. So all those areas should be as low no distortion as possible, just to prove that that nobody is perfect. You can see a nice big texture seam slash slip around the side here. So again, if you're going to have a texture seam or split, make sure it's away from where the player can see it. But realistically, the only places that this model has structure is around the side of the canopy, towards the engine intake, and on the side of these little bumper areas. So what I currently have with distortion across the nose, not too bad. Windshield. Oh, this? In this case there is actually polys. So, and here's something that you guys can try yourself, and I'll admit this is usually the first thing I do whenever I start playing a game, believe it or not, especially with the third-person camera. So, first time I played Batman Arkham Asylum, the initial intro scene where you actually get to control Batman is walking down the front hall or through the front intake hall of Arkham Asylum, and there are huge floodlights or huge white panels, some field of white on either side of the hallway. I spent a good 10-15 minutes with Batman standing in front of them, because the easiest way to tell if there's, or to see a polygon silhouette, so to tell whether something is polygons or texture, is to put it against a field of flat color. And as soon as you start doing that, you can actually see the contrast, or it increases the contrast between the model in the background. Yep. That's especially where it works. So a lot of the times people will try to prevent having solid colors directly behind the character. So like in side scroller games, so think like Shovel Knight, Mega Man, that sort of thing, with 3D models, they try and prevent having a solid flat color behind the character, because at that point it sort of emphasizes where the polygon silhouette is as opposed to the normal map, implying where it should be. Typically it's not an issue, like it's not something that people get ripped on for, but it's still something that happens, and it's fun to do. Go back, play a 3D game and see if you can trace out the polygons. Yeah, I guess if you guys haven't sort of experienced it already, you'll never be able to play games the same way again, because you're going to be stopping and looking at, oh, how is this made? Oh, I see a N-gon or whatever. Z-fighting is going to be the most common typically. I think a lot of the text, or a lot of the memory soak from 2077 though, is the post effects, and textures as opposed to the models. Yeah. I didn't have a particular relationship with CD Projekt Red before this happened, so it's kind of like, yeah, that sucks. Although I can definitely understand a lot of people feeling betrayed almost, because they have been a really user-friendly or fan-friendly company. So. Yeah, let's see this. Okay. I'm gonna pop it. So you guys will actually be doing this sort of thing later on. Long story short, and this is like super short. Actually, let me see it again. I think this is all models. So again, this is not something that you guys will do until third year, but I may as well give you a quick little breakdown since the image was brought up. I don't know if I can do this sort of demonstration quickly, but I'll try. Oops. Yeah, that's pretty bad, but it's going to get the job done. And just for good measure, I'm going to pretend that I sub-D'd this. So, low poly model, high poly model done crappily. You can see some of this triangulation start in certain areas. Actually, I'll take this off entirely and do smoothing groups only instead. There we go. So again, really crappy sub-D model. Different programs have different words for this. For Max, it's called Pro Optimizer. And do a 50% reduction. 80% reduction, sorry. No, this is commonly called, well, the more common term that people know of is decimation. So here, I'll just put these guys side by side. So there are some shading artifacts here. Like you can see some non-planars or some areas where the polys have crossed or started to cross, causing shading issues. But compare viewports. So 32,000 tries, 3,000 tries. Now, this is definitely hacky, obviously. And if this was a hard surface object, it wouldn't be such a big deal because it's not going to be deforming at all. Same thing with that pistol. But if you had areas of really high detail, again, not something that I can do quickly, but yep. The low poly, because they want all that detail in it. And I imagine that there's another model aside from that one that was used as the high poly bake target or high poly source for the normal map. So you could still take that or take the high poly version of that gun into ZBrush or whatever sculpting program you want to use and do some high poly detail on it. Typically, so something that happened before decimation. One second, I just want to get this guy down again. So there's the formation that's similar to what you're seeing on that gun. Obviously, this is, again, super hacky. But something that gets done before decimation is that it gets unwrapped. So if I take this off, and I just quickly do something like this, pop, peel. So I'm not going to unwrap the whole thing, obviously, but keep this sort of in your mind's eye, what that island looks like. Do a mesh smooth, so this would be the high poly sculpt or whatever. Then Pro Optimize for decimation, calculate 10%, And protect borders, keep textures, keep UV boundaries, calculate 20%. Yep. So keep a bit of that UV island in mind. It's the exact same shape for the UV island. So if I were to take all this stuff off, or I go back down to the original. Actually, let's do this. There's the two different islands. High poly and decimated, original low poly. So this would be the model that you would work with in terms of actually modeling and unwrapping. And then if you need additional silhouette detail or some iteration on values or form, sub-D it, so subdivision modeling. Then once you have the subdivision model, using Pro Optimizer or decimation in order to give you a lower poly in-game model that still has the same UV islands, still has the same overall form or silhouette. Yeah, again, this is stuff that you guys do third year. But because it was asked, and it's cool because, you know, the entire 3D workflow is obviously interesting to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be teaching it. Yeah. So don't try executing any of this on your projects. By all means, play with it. But yeah, don't do it for any of your homeworks, please. You will be doing sub-D, you will be doing high poly this term. And then next term, without any decimation or unwrap on it. And then next term, it's going to be sub-D and sculpting for characters. Sorry, sub-D and modeling for characters. Anyway. So I'm almost done here, and I believe someone said that they zoned out and just finished unwrapping it, which is cool. Okay. Hey, if it works, it works. So realistically, I only have 5 shells left. Or 6, depending on what I want to do. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing unusual about them. I could even, select most of them. Quick peel with detach turned on because I'm lazy. Yep. Although you don't have to keep that central nose piece attached. Although if you can pack with it the way it is, go for it. If you don't need a texture to transition between these two surfaces, and again, this is where your texture artist, your concept artist is, you're relying on them for this kind of information. If there's no transition between those surfaces, break them, because it's easier to pack. So I'll do the other side. Pop. Top. Pop. Pop. Okay, match sizes. Find an edge that I can make planar, or linear rather, so I can maybe go about stacking them. So if I do want to stack them, mirror vertically, verts, snaps on, bang. And these guys are last ones. and the canopy. Potentially I could do this as a strip, because right now if I just hit quick peel, again, it's a completely circular or rounded form. There's going to be some distortion on it. The only way to release it is breaking at least one of the edges. The only problem with doing something like this, so if I had another object in here, actually since they're doing it right now in 3D Dev and you guys have probably seen it, one of the other things to take into consideration is that if you have an object like this, so if you guys haven't seen it, the third years are doing wells with tileable textures only. If this was your unwrap, on the one hand you could say, come here, you could run a planar or a vertical planar projection on it, pin the center, sorry, give me a second, convert back, pin, peel out, obviously really distorted. Breaking these guys off as separate would allow you to release some of your distortion. But having that ring obviously is going to cause some issues with when you start packing things together, because it starts sucking up a lot of space needlessly. That strip, no, that's exactly where I'm going. Yeah. So this could potentially be distortion free if I didn't put that chamfer on it. If it wasn't raised and shrunk or scaled, this would be correct. I would still want the size of the object to be actually linear, but having a rounded shell, and you guys will see this with characters, so changes in the bicep, tricep, sorry, changes in volume of the arm on the bicep, tricep, elbow, forearm muscles, in order to get them distortion free, it's going to be a rounded shell, and that's going to make it harder to pack. So again, it becomes the balancing act of what's more important to me: reducing the amount of texture memory that I need by changing what my texture sizes are, or distortion. So yeah, again, you guys are going to see all sorts of, you know, scenarios where you're the ideal situation or the ideal solution changes. But yeah, I'm going to set this to strip if it doesn't blow up on me. Nope, it blew up. Come here. Grab, isolate, edge. Grab these two instead. Strip. I don't know why it's giving me this. That is not correct. Alright. So worst case scenario, if it doesn't work with strip, and I've never tried using strip on this before, so I had no idea if it would work or not. Nope. Very worst case scenario, break an edge, let it do its radial unwrap or radial peel, and then start straightening it by hand. Not something that you guys will have to do for the homework assignment, but I figured may as well show it, because strip unwrap does not work. This shell or this project has enough small shells that you can just stuff them on the inside and not lose any UV space, but you know, I'm just playing around at this point. Sorry, I stepped on someone. For strip to work, strip ignores pins. Yeah, it just detects what polygons are parallel or adjacent to your current selection, and then tries to make a strip out of them. So I've got all my pieces rather. Pin, peel. Again, I'm going through and making them linear where possible or aligned to the X or Y axes where possible. Any area where I'm going to have text, I probably don't want to overlap, because if I do, I'm going to end up with the text being flipped one side versus the other. What kind of shader? Oh, by material assignments or individual material assignments by polygon? Mm-mm. No, you'll be doing it all inside of one UV sheet. I think we're using slightly different terminology. So if you're talking about, typically, not always, but typically when you're talking about shader, you're talking about how the engine draws the material. So got it. Yep, no, I follow you. No, you guys won't be expected to do that until year 2. Yeah. We will be going through like assigning specular values, so determining what area is shiny, what isn't, generating some base normal maps to give your models or your textures rather some implied geometrical detail. But you guys won't be expected to do multiple shaders or multiple materials rather. So right now I'm just packing 1 UV space, trying to get things relatively consistently sized. So we scale, grab, flip, verts, snap, yep, and isolate. So I definitely need to be doing some playing around here. The only thing to be quote-unquote careful of, and one of the other reasons that I have all these pins already set, is, and I'm sure some of you have already sort of gone in this direction with your thinking, if Pack Normalize's purpose is to get texel density or the size of your squares consistent across your object, so you can see in my case these guys are pretty widely off. These guys are off, super off. So if the purpose is to get your square sizes consistent, can you use it across the entire object? Yep. The only caveat is if you hit pack normalize, it's going to unstack your shells because by default it doesn't want anything to be overlapping. The easy solution to that is find the shells that are overlapped or that you have overlapped. So go select overlap polys. It'll show you which ones are either stacked or are still sitting on top of one another. Move one of each off to the side. So move them back outside of 1, 1 UV space. So one of these and one of these. So these are the quote-unquote duplicates. Now run pack normalize with everything else. And now you would just match up your UVs, snap them together as you would, or as I was doing previously. Move them, snap them, peel them, done. So one thing to note about pack normalize, by default that rescale option is on, and going back to what someone said earlier, if it's not seen, does it really matter how distinct or how clean the texture is? This would be a situation where we can address that. So the bottom of this ship, we already established that unless the racer goes over top of a completely reflective surface, or if the vehicle for some reason gets above the camera, this will never be seen. So it'd be kind of nice, even though right now our texel density is perfect or close to it, it'd be kind of nice to redistribute some of those some of the texture or the texture space from this area that's never going to be seen to the areas that are. So to do that, you take off rescale. Now this actually gave me a really good pack. Like there's still some areas that I can poke around and rescale to get it even better. So areas that have a lot of detail or structure to them, or text, I would want to scale these guys up to fill that extra space. But right from the get-go, I can take this bottom shell, scale it in a bit. With rescale turned off, it's not going to say, okay, this one should be this big based on these guys. It's just going to say, with the shells, the current comparative or relative scale that they are, repack 1, 1. So it's not going to change or rescale things to get the texel density to match. It's just going to rescale everything at the same time, at the same rate, and pack it back into 1, 1 for you. It's not a one-click done affair. You can see it now. I've got even more empty space, but it can give you a good starting point. So from here, I already said that I'd probably end up with text on the tail fin, so I give it a little bit more UV space. Actually, I'm going to switch these guys around. That's pretty solid. And now I would bring in the copies. The only one that I can't do the snap or pin to pin peel method with, this can never be quick peeled. So I can't use quick peel on this. I have to actually bring it in vertice, snap corner to corner, and then scale it by hand, because quick peel will destroy what I'm trying to preserve. But pretty quick. Just go through, do a quick alignment. So again, working low poly for as long as possible, or as low poly as you can for as long as possible. Also means that you'll have less UVs to play with or to reassign, to move once you get to the texturing step. And that's it. So I'll move these guys over next class in order to get it out. Tools, render template. What am I doing? I'll set this to 2048. Save it. Desktop. File. Goose. UVs. Bring it to Photoshop. So the last thing I'll show you this class. Next class is just going to be me texturing this. So I'm going to show you some of the work steps that are going to help you make the most out of your textures. Not only that, but it's also going to start preparing you for use of Substance. This is my UVs. Quick desaturate with Control-Shift-U. Set to multiply. Even if you didn't have alpha channel turned on, so if you created a new layer, or sorry, if you brought these in and there was no alpha channel in it, so no checker pattern, as soon as you set it to multiply, sorry, invert then multiply, you can start with your base flood colors and still see the UVs over top. I would just say make sure that you lock your UV layer so you don't accidentally nudge it left or right, which would be the worst case, or the worst thing you could do, or you accidentally erase them or whatever. So at this point I could start texturing. It really helps to have a second monitor so you can have the model up and figure out where certain polygons are. We'll deal with that as it comes. Yep. It's not the most memory efficient with them, but at this point you guys are fine. Yep. One feature. Yep. One feature that I don't know a single person who uses it, but it does exist. I don't even know where it is, to be honest. I'm pretty sure it's in Tools. Yeah, Viewport Canvas. Basically, it's Max's attempt. Browse material to assign. Let's do PBR. Base color map. All the setup. It's 3D painting, but no one uses it because yeah, painting on it. Then you can save it out as a PSD. Yeah. The best and worst thing about 3CO Max, Softimage, which is not used very much anymore, if at all. 3CO Max, Maya, Softimage, all those other main 3D suites. They're meant to be generalists. So they're general programs. Like you can model in Max, you can sculpt in Max, you can texture in Max, you can animate in Max, but it doesn't do any of those things particularly well. Personally, I feel that the Unwrap and modeling tools in Max are, for me, preferable to the ones in Maya. I can't speak to Blender, but one of the best things about Blender, and one of the reasons it's finding traction with industry, is that it is so open source. So it gets to the point where you're working on Blender at home on your own projects, and you find this really cool plugin or whatever from the Blender community, and you bring it home and you work with it, and it's like, oh, this is awesome. And then you go to the studio and you're like, can we have this plugin? And it's like, well, with the source where it's coming from and blah 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 blah, it just causes some more hurdles. Certain studios are better with that than others, because like Ubisoft, for example, can just throw money at the problem until it goes away. Obviously nothing against Ubisoft, but they are a gigantic AAA company. But I think that's part of the problem. That being said, Blender is being picked up more and more. When I was in a wait, which new movie? Isn't it's just 4.0 and that's it? I'll have to take a look at it. So I'm just going to show you guys one quick thing. By the way, you can't see it, but I have a poster over here of Evangelion Unit 2. So Evangelion is my jam. I'm just going to quickly show you how to do the save as action real quick. So right now, nice. So save as PNG. Obviously, I've already been doing this a couple times. As soon as you have that texture assigned, so right now it's just a green screen or a green flood fill, throw it on. I gotta get out of paint. So it's assigned. Now whenever I resave as the same file name, oops. So I just flooded the canopy area, Control Shift S, PNG, same file, overwrite it. Max will update it. It does take max a second. You usually have to like middle mouse scrub in viewport to tell it to resample the texture it's being directed to. But as you save, it'll just update. Rather than having to hit Control Shift S, indicating the correct file, tell yes to overwrite, set settings, blah blah blah. Go Alt F9 or Window Actions. To stay organized, go New Folder. This is my custom action thing. You can name it whatever you want. Create new. I'll call it save as diffuse because that's what we're doing. And the nice thing is that you can actually assign it to an F key or a function key. So I'm going to set this to Control F9. Color coded if you want. All you really need to do is get a name in there, record, and then just press Control Shift S to save as. Save as your diffuse texture. Yes. And then as soon as it finishes saving, just hit stop. So that now I can start working on the rest of the texture. So this area. So this area becomes yellow. I don't know. I'll just put my initials on it. Just hide your UVs. In this case, I bound it to Control F9. So Control F9. It's saved. Back to Max. Max is sleeping until I middle mouse. There it is. So yeah, I'll be using that extensively next class. So I'll go through, I'll texture this guy, I'll show you some of the texture processes that are going to be most conducive to you going forward. And yeah. So I ran a little late, but go ahead. Nope, I'm going to give you a version if you don't have one. That being said, using this to practice is a good idea. You won't be handing in this one. You'll be handing in one that I give you at the time. No problem. No problem. Just sharing some love with anyone else who's an Evangelion person. Yeah, this was my my wallpaper for a while. Thank you. This is mine, by the way. Like, this is my texture and model. No. No, this... No, this is me sculpting. Sculpting and texturing. The terrible thing is, I hate it. There's so much that I want to change on it now. And that's just, like, my weakness as an artist is that I'm never happy with my own work. Ever. And I'm sure a few of you can relate to that. But yeah, I'm a huge Evangelion geek. So like speculating what Evangelion 2 looks like underneath its helmet. It's just fun. Yeah, this is me. Nightmare fuel. It's a little wall-eyed though. That's something else that I screwed up on. I'll take that as a compliment. It's the Attack Titan plus Evangelion. Yep. Yeah. It's a body horror mecha show. Because the entire, like, syncing up with the Titan, that's pretty, I think that's body horror. Anyway, I'll stop chit-chatting, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good weekend. Anyone who wants to see me in Discord, just send me a direct message. I'm going to go have a cigarette, and then I'll be in there. Yep, I saw it. Are you on a schedule right now? Like, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'll send you a message when I go through the queue that's formed, and if you're free, we'll chat then. And if not, I'll just I'll fire back an email, at the very least. Fair. Fair.